So today the topic, I'm catching up with a presentation that I intended to give back in July, and I had to cancel because of health issues. So what I did, I just reviewed and took from that presentation and just took out some of the things that I think are more important, and redeveloped some of the areas. We're going to look at a little bit of literary reviews and scoping reviews. One of really the frame and the background, the context for me putting this together is actually the second part of this. How do we help our students, faculty, researchers, the people that we serve? How do we actually help them get a good groundwork to get a solid research project or a robust research project? As a librarian for over 30 years, as a faculty member, as an advisor for various doctoral students, this is one of the big issues that I constantly face, and I keep reinventing the wheel, trying to find what works best and what not. And today's presentation will include some of those hints. I believe, yes, I already mentioned some of these. Oh, the other thing is on the second bullet part over there, which is actually something I've been working on for a while, is actually how to create our own tools that we can share with students for them to organize, analyze the literature reviews in a ways that they are manageable and not time consuming, but effective for them to write their draft or write their literary reviews. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that at the end. So how we set up the groundwork for robust research. Some of the things that have worked for me. So again, one of the big issues that I faced at over the years at the reference desk, or when I'm doing consultations in my offices, or when I'm teaching research methods to grad students, veterinary students, medical students, is something that for us, given our area of expertise, this comes as a second nature. We spend hours a year and many hundreds of hours over the course of many years, basically putting together keywords, identifying alternative terms, looking at control vocabulary. And for many of us, probably most of us or everybody, we do this as a second nature. We know what to look for. We know how to put it together, how to use Boolean, how to modify our searches when we are changing from one database to another. But when it comes to teaching this or showing someone for the very first time how to do this, it's a little bit of an issue. One of the things that I explain my students, and I'm pretty much sure that you know this, we are dealing nowadays with a generation of people that they are experts searching in Google. But like I tell my students, searching in a database, searching in a catalog, searching, creating something searchable that will be effective is very different than how you actually search in Google. There are things that you can use as a framework, but this is a whole different skill set. And I make emphasis on this with my students, so they get to actually they get to see that this new skill set, they need to learn all about it and practice it if they want to get it right. I was talking to a class of doctoral students yesterday, where actually I was telling them of all the skill sets and competencies that you're gonna get in grad school, perhaps one of the most critical one, but perhaps one of the one that is studied the least, is this one. You as an user, you as a researcher, learning how to be very effective at searching databases, searching for articles, and creating search strategies that are effective. So let's take a look at this. Over the years, I created different slide sets, different strategies, pathfinders, if you remember what pathfinders are, right? And libguides, things like that, explaining how do you identify a research problem, how do you identify keywords from that, thinking about alternative terms, and then looking or explaining, sometimes briefly, sometimes in depth, the concept of control vocabularies. But again, I'm always facing the same thing. These are terminologies that we librarians know and understand, but people who don't have a library background, they're not used to search on databases. For many of them, they don't have a clue of what we're talking, even if we are explaining, and yes, they can identify keywords and things like that, but it becomes a little bit cumbersome for them to understand these various concepts and how they work together to create an effective search strategy. So recently, as I was redesigning one of my courses, I went on a search and I looked at many of the libguides that you guys put together, many of the libguides that are available out there, and looking at how do you explain this, how do you present this to people, and I found one that right away I knew this was going to be a hit with my students. And there are many others. This is not the only one. I don't want to dismiss some of your libguides that are out there, but when I saw this one, it really hit me. I said, this is the one I'm going to use, and I put it into practice, and it really worked. It did the job. So I'm talking about the UCLA Library Research Guide. On their systematic review guide, there is a section that is called creating the search. And on that section, yes, they have instructions on how to create the search, how to identify keywords, etc. But what really helped me and what really helped my students was the table that they use as part of the instruction set, where they actually created this, let's say, an Excel table with 4 columns. And after working out the PICO question and identifying who's the patient, what is the topic, or what is intervention, and etc., right? After breaking all that down, they break it even further down to, okay, what is the key topic? And you have the user telling you, these are my 3 main keywords, these are my 3 main topics, or these are the 3 things that I'm looking for in my research study. And then you just put it in a single table, just like this, right? They keep, UCLA, they have other instructions, and then they're looking at alternative terms, and they explain how to look for them, and there are different methods. Something that I just learned, I believe it was last week, I was at one of the Medical Library Association's webinars. There is a series about systematic reviews by Margaret Foster. She has a great series on systematic reviews. And on last week's webinar, she explained that they're actually testing and trying using AI to identify alternative terms. And as part of that webinar, they asked us to go to our preferred AI app. It could be Copilot in Microsoft, or it could be any ChatGPT or anything. And basically they said, okay, ask your AI to identify 10 alternative terms for one of your topics and see what comes up. And then there was a good discussion. And yeah, it was really fast. Second, not only me, but many of the attendants, some of you may have been there, they realized that by looking at using AI, it came up with some terms that we would have not thought about them. And of course, yes, I know there are concerns about the use of AI and all that, but there are some supplementary functions that I think that AI may work well with, and this is actually one of them. So you may want to check, and yes, we have Thesauri, we can go online for Thesauri and whatnot and look at some of the resources, but engage your patrons and ask them, okay, these are your 3 terms. Go to your preferred AI and ask them for alternative terms and see what comes up. And in collaboration with your user, identify which are the ones that you think are more appropriate to include in your search. UCLA, they have this table when they have, yes, the first topics and then the alternative terms on the side. Then UCLA keep talking about control vocabularies. One of the most typical one for us that works in medical and health-related libraries is, of course, MESH, the medical subject headings. So you may show them how to do them. There are ways to identify that. As a matter of fact, this morning I gave it a try, and I went to Copilot, the AI on my home computer, and I asked Copilot, okay, build a search strategy for, and it was very simple. It was, I want to look at dogs, immunology in dogs, 2 keywords, immunology and dogs, but I want to use medical subject headings. And again, like in a matter of 3 seconds, the first thing that the AI did was to identify about 10 to 12 related MESH terms with their identifiers and everything. And of course, the first 2 were, of course, dogs and immunology. And then at the very end, it showed me like a very basic, very crude search statement like dogs and immunology, which it wasn't what I actually was looking for because it was just a very basic thing, but it identified right away the MESH term. So the AI may be used to actually do the next steps, here with your patron, identifying MESH term. Of course, I'm not saying that there are not other sources. There are other sources in PubMed. There's a MESH finder and things like that that we can use. Many of your LibGuides actually include some hints and instructions on how to identify those terms. So down on the table, and it's a very long, it's a long page, so I just took short snapshots here. The third column in UCLA's LibGuide, they're showing actually the MESH terms that they identify that are appropriate for this table. So here we have the keywords, the alternative terms, and the control vocabulary for that given database. And you know what comes next, which is another of the big issues when teaching students who don't work with this typically, which is, okay, how do you put this together? How do you use Boolean connectors? And yes, you know from experience that they're gonna interchange and or because they understand it the other way or whatnot. And so what UCLA did was actually showing on the 4th column, how do you put this together? And here's a model, an example of modeling in teaching. Here's how you put things together. Everything that is related, you're gonna use OR, and for PubMed, you're gonna type it exactly like this. As a matter of fact, you can copy and paste this directly into PubMed, click enter, and you're gonna get some results. And believe me, there's a difference in the reception from students when you show it to them like this. You're teaching, but you're showing them how to make it work. And then one of the exercises I do in my class is, yes, I do with them the first one, going step by step. And then I ask them to work either in pairs or in groups and work with the rest of their search statements. If I have 2 people, they're going to be 2 different search problems. So they have about probably 15 to 20 minutes of work. And then I pick 1 or 2 to show in class what they did and how they put everything together up to this point. After that, of course, it's a matter of then showing them how do you combine all the different parts together with and first I will show them something similar to this, where I show them the text, including two of the combined strategies together. And then the third one, how do you add the third one? But I will go to the PubMed interface and show them that in the search history under the advanced section, you can actually click and add with or click and add with and, click enter, and it's going to do the work for you. Any questions at this point? I'm pretty sure that I'm preaching to the choir, so I'm not giving a lot of detail. I'm just showing how I'm using this with my students and what actually worked, which I hope that these hints may actually help you work with your students or even your faculty member. Again, one of the great things that I like about this is the visual aspect, but also the opportunity to get the user be a collaborator in the process, showing them how to do it, giving them hints, and then going to the interface, having them copy and paste, click enter, and see the result, which is very different than just telling them, just combine this, use and click enter, and then you're going to get the result. Being more interactive with the students in this day and age is really, really helpful. All right, let me see. Participants Q&A. I'm looking at the Q&A. There are no questions there. Checking on the chat. Yeah, okay. I'm looking at a comment by Gary Atwood. Very good. Thank you so much. And that's very true. There's still a chance that some of the suggested mesh terms may actually be a fake. Or, yeah, AI is hallucinating, right? That's a very good thing. So, yes, as much as possible, I will actually go to the mesh finder, which is something that I also tried with my students a week ago or 2 weeks ago. I showed them the mesh finder, and the advantage of the mesh finder is that once you add the mesh finder, it has the function that automatically it will create the search statement, and then it will automatically add it to PubMed for you to search. Very easy. So yes, I will go to the PubMed for the mesh finder and use it and show it to my students. There's another comment here that, yes, by Mike Jondi. This is so true. So many graduates have never had any formal training at the undergraduate level, and that's true. So I'm having master level students, doctoral level students, with many gaps in their knowledge of how to search for information, how to use databases, etc. Not only that, I'm working with a cohort of students. We have about 20 doctoral students, and I'm not. I'm very sensitive. I have the utmost appreciation for them. As a matter of fact, I'm actually their advocate. About 80% of our doctoral students, they come from other countries, and I'm talking about 7 countries so far. So I'm talking India, China, Africa, Honduras, Colombia. So I have students whose educational background is not only in a different language, but they may not have the exposure to some of the databases or some good quality databases, or they haven't had formal training into searches. So when I redesigned my research course this year, I made sure to cover all the basics on every one of the lectures. And even if I don't teach it, even if I'm not talking about that in my lecture, I give them, I create mini modules, like 7-minute modules with readings or showing them LibGuides to go and search and just asking some key guide questions. These are the things that you need to look for. These are the things that you need to learn. These are the things that you need to practice. So basically, I'm just passing the baton. The responsibility of learning is actually on them. I'm just showing them, as a good librarian and as a professor, I'm just giving them the resources, the guide questions, and telling them, this is what you need to know. This is how you practice. Thank you for those comments. I like the whole skill set that faculty just assume student pick up somewhere along the line. You know, it's not only the students, it's also the faculty. Well, my door is closed, so I think I'm okay. I'll survive this one. Yeah. All right, let me see. I don't see any other question. All right. Perfect. Okay, back to the strategy here, to the presentation here. So again, there are many LibGuides that you can use. And again, one of the, just to give you a little bit of context, when I went to library school 30 years ago, we didn't have internet yet. It was, yes, before internet. Yeah, it was only books and journals in the library, right? And computers were like 2 years down the line yet. But one of the things that my professor insisted, and one of the things that instilled in me, was that once you're a librarian, you have to work with whatever you have at hand. You cannot assume that you're going to have the good textbooks, the good encyclopedias. You have to work with what you have. And if you're going to go, and again, I'm talking prior to 1994 here. So he used to tell us, if you're going to go to a public library with little or no funding, you have to make do with whatever you have. So instead of reinventing the wheel, sometimes you have to see what's available out there. So I learned to do that for 30 years, and I'm doing that. If you see my presentations, I'm just, instead of creating things on my own, I'm looking at what other people are doing. And I recommend that as a strategy for you as well, to look at how other people are presenting this topic, how to do search strategies, combine or more extended search strategies, and see what you can use. And of course, give them credit. If you see my lectures, I'm always telling who's doing what and presenting the, giving you the URLs for that as well. What I find is outside of clinical medicine, there's little awareness of the different types of review. Everything out there is a systematic review. Jennifer, thank you. I'm going to get back to that comment in a few slides. Yeah, thank you so much. All right. So UCLA, on their website, there's also here, there's this link for types of literature reviews, which is one of the topics we're going to talk down the line a little bit. My recommendation, look at these LibGuides. Some of them are very, very well put together. Not only is going to tell you the different types, but they're going to give you steps or guidelines, different standards on how to put them together, examples of articles that have used them or whatnot. So just another hint, look for types of review in those LibGuides. What do we have next? Other tools for developing search strategies. These are actually hyperlink, but it came up with a different color. So Yale have a mesh analyzer, mesh on demand, PubMed, Pub Reminder, PubMed subject filter. So these are other tools that I recommend that you use for developing the search strategies. Moving along. I don't know if you have heard, and probably yes, because it's been mentioned alongside in professional channels, and in some of the there are some publications about these search hedges. I only heard about this about probably 2 or 3 years ago, but once I look into what it is, it got me hooked, because basically that's what we all have been doing for quite a bit of time. Basically, a search hedge in a very basic form is basically looking at all the appropriate terminology or combination of terms, including control vocabularies, and combining them in a way that is more effective to get the appropriate results. And there are different ways to do that. Again, one of the strategies that I use with my student, I just mentioned it briefly because it may help you, either in PubMed or when I go to Scopus or Web of Science, I search my keywords one by one and look at the search history and look at the number of hits, and then combine them together to get to eliminate duplicates and get exactly a good count of articles. This is something I show my student how to do it. What search hedges is basically that you combine the terms that are best to find a particular topic or articles about a particular format. It could be meta-analysis, or it could be systematic reviews, scoping reviews, right? So you can create search hedges on your own for a particular database to look for a particular subject or a particular format of articles. Formalized search hedges, they are created by librarians for the most part. Some researchers have done some of these too. The one thing about search hedges is that, as you know, once you create this great search strategy for one database, if you're going to move to a different database, all the time is not wasted, but you cannot copy and paste the search strategy from one database to another because there are a series of issues. It could be like the formatting on a particular database. They may use quotation for exact phrases. They may use, another one may use parentheses. Some of them may use field prefixes. Like if you're going to use keyword, you can use KW and then whatever term you're going to use. But other databases do not use KW. And for librarians and non-librarians, one of the big issues is that if you assume that what works in one database is going to work on the other, you're going to get mixed results, or you're not going to get the results that you need. So official, well-produced search hedges, the ones that some of the group of librarians are putting together, they get that very well put together search strategy for PubMed, and then they modify it to create the one that's going to work for the same subject in Scopus, for the same subject in Web of Science, or for the same subject in any of the other databases. So that may include the syntax, whether parentheses, commas, quotation marks, field, the different field abbreviations appropriate for each database. Even terminology may be different. In some databases, you can use singular, and it's going to look for singular and plural. In other databases, you have to actually create a combined search strategy for the singular and the plural. Some will use control vocabulary, some will not. So you create that modified version for every one of the databases, or some selected databases. Search strategies, and I'm talking now about officially well put together search strategies, are trying to do that. They're trying to create variations. So you just copy and paste what works in PubMed, or you copy and paste what works in Scopus. And so it's working. And there are groups of librarians, and I'm in some of those groups, where we have experts on particular fields, even in librarianship, that they verify that the keywords are the very best ones, that the terminology is the very best one, and then they verify the results to make sure that you're getting the gold standard results, or you're getting the very best articles for a given topic or subject. Right, let me see here. I'm giving you a link there. There's a research guide, for systematic reviews about search hedges. I recommend that you go there because you're gonna see more information about how to put them together, how they work, etc. I already talked about this, so I can move ahead. So here's an example of one. I went to this American University of Beirut, the university library. They have LibGuides, and under one of the subtopics in the LibGuides, they actually show you what a search hedge will look like. This is actually one of those hedges. This one is for Medline through the Ovid filter. So if you're looking for systematic reviews, this is what you're gonna put together, or you're gonna copy and paste this and put into the interface to search for systematic reviews. This is only to search for articles with that format. Of course, you're gonna also create the keyword combination for the topic of the systematic reviews that you're trying to look for. But this is the section for the systematic review. Now, I mentioned that you can modify these to adapt them to different databases. They're showing other examples. Next one. What are you going to type in PubMed? Notice that this is on Medline through Ovid, right? And it looks like, okay, 6-7 line paragraph. But if you're going to search in PubMed, look at everything that you can use or you should use to get a comprehensive result list for systematic reviews in PubMed. You will also notice that there are no parentheses here. And you're going to see that there are some items listed in brackets, right? And you see the asterisks when you're using wildcards as well. So you see how it can how one search hedge can change from one to the other. And again, the objective is to create the best search strategy for a given database. Same search for Embase. And again, there's different syntax, punctuation, etc. for looking for the same type of article. And one more outside the medical, well, somewhat outside of the medical field, PsycInfo on ProQuest. And again, you see this is shorter, but again, this is what works on ProQuest PsycInfo to get systematic reviews. You see the differences. I just wanted to show you that. Again, a visual representation of what I'm talking about when it comes to search hedges. I'm working with a group at the Medical Library Association that is working with this for the Animal and Veterinary Caucus. That's the one I'm working with. And we're putting together some search hedges that are for veterinary subjects. Here's an example of one that I would say they put this one together before I joined the group. If you're looking for articles or research that has to do with cows, what are the appropriate terms to find all possible articles in PubMed of research that have been done with cows? And then you get all the terminology there. And word of caution, this is one of 7 pages on the same table. It is that extensive, it is that comprehensive. It can get that complex. So it takes a little bit of trial and error, checking what works, what doesn't work. But the advantage is that once you find something that works, you can share it with the professionals in the field, with your association, caucuses, etc. And other people get the advantage of getting very effective searches by looking at this from the work of other people. This is the example of looking for cattle research on PubMed. Now, this other table, I'm showing this table. It has 2 different examples, first for African clawed frogs and then for cats. What I am showing this table, they are not as extensive, but the first row is showing what you will have to type in PubMed for African clawed frogs. But if you're going to use, if you're going to search on other databases, most likely, this is what you will have to type. And notice the differences in what you include or do not include in order to get the results. Same thing with cats. What do you include in PubMed versus more likely what you're going to use in other databases. All right, checking here. And I see many resources. Oh, I love this. Something that I took out from the original slide is that we are a community of practice. Every webinar is a community of practice. I'm not the only one providing content, suggestion, hints. When you look at this chat post, you get a ton of information. Some of that actually I will incorporate into my slide later before I post it, but I appreciate the work that you're doing. People asking questions, other people answering. That's great. Thank you so much. Last comment in the chat, dialogue. Yes, I remember dialogue in 1994. Yes, I know about the trauma too. I shared the experience. All right, work in progress. As I mentioned, I'm working with the MLA, Animal and Veterinary Information Specialist Caucus. We have a search strategies working group, and we are working on several hedges. Some of them are ready. What we're working also is on putting together a LibGuide that we have instructions and how-to videos on how to put these hedges together. So you can get started on it, put together one. You can share them to whatever group you want. But we're putting together this LibGuide that is gonna be helpful not only for veterinarians, but you can apply this to other medical, health, and outside the medical field subjects. So as soon as we have that, we're gonna send an announcement. One critical thing that is important when you're putting together such strategies is to know what database fields are available on different databases. Yes, we know that more likely than not, you're going to have an author field on every database, and you're going to have a title field on every database. But you know, something that surprised me when I went to the first one here, Agricola, and I look at the list of fields, I was looking for the keyword. They don't have a keyword field on that particular database. So if I were to create a keyword search strategy and apply it to that one, it may not work. They have some probably keywords on the title only, but not keywords as we typically search on many other fields. So this guide is available from Ovid, and actually the link is not showing up. I have to change the colors. I'm going to give you, this is one of the tools I'm going to share with you. So you get to look at the different databases, what fields are available on each one. So if you have to modify a search strategy, you know what fields to target. More about search hedges, I use American University of Beirut. University of Illinois of Chicago also have great information about that, so make sure to check these two links. There are other how-to guides from Ovid, including how to put together a PICO question, a resource center on doing that, how to do expert searches, how to work with search histories, which is great when you're working with multiple terms or complex searches. It's better to break it down and look what works and what not, and then start combining those terms until you get something really useful. And the Search Builder tool. This is not only great for us to reskill or train on better ways to do things, but also to share with your students. And you probably may want to also include them in your LibGuides after giving credit to them. Just briefly, a link, if you want to check how to search in Scopus, there is a Scopus search guide similar to Scopus. Remember that every database, more likely than not, is going to have either a help link or search strategies or how to work with them, or even in the narrative form or a PDF that you can share with students. So make sure to check all those study guides or help guides that may be available from the database vendors. Any questions so far? All right, let's see, question section. Q&A, perfect. This is why we need other people doing presentations, because yes, I know I talk too much, sorry. Literature reviews. I'm gonna just go briefly over this one. There's a lot of material to cover, but one of the things I reminded myself, and I had to remind my students, that when we're talking about literature reviews, there are two different aspects of literature reviews. One is actually a process when you actually go and check for resources if you are putting together a paper, a dissertation, a thesis, right? Literature review is what you're gonna check to see first if the articles, if somebody has written something similar to what you're proposing, so you don't waste your time, or you're looking for supplementary or supportive literature to what you're working, for your resource, or even opposing viewpoints. In some, because I know I'm talking to mostly ACRL librarians here, not only the medical fields, but when you're working with students from non-medical areas, particularly those students working in English, composition, or social sciences and humanities, in some cases, they're going to have a very structured way to do a literature review. Some of them has to do because they are actually teaching how to develop an argument, how to present supportive evidence, how to support opposing evidence, how to put together your take into that. So they follow a very strict set of rules on how to put together a literature reviews. Of course, if you're working with thesis, you're working with dissertations. If you're working with science literature reviews, there are other aspects that you have to take into consideration. So again, not all literature reviews are the same. It may actually change from user to user, student to student, faculty to faculty. And this is something that I had to remind myself. There is not a single way to do this. Rather, you have to, as part of your reference interview, you try to get more details about either the structure or the expectations or the type of format that the paper they're working for, so you can actually help them put this together. Second part is actually the research method. There are literature reviews. You can use some of this as actually a research paper. You can create a research method, a whole research method out of literature reviews. This is not something new. And many of us are working into that. The literature review as process, of course, you're gonna, for the most part, you're gonna follow the structure of the research to identify keywords and again, look at discipline styles, etc. So this graphic that I got from this LibGuide shows 7 steps of producing a literature reviews. I'm gonna add a chart. I couldn't scan it and put it here now, but I just found a great chart from one of the research method textbooks, this one in nursing, I believe it is, that shows the different parts of a research paper. Why do you need to search literature for every one of the parts and examples of where you're going to find those? So I think that's going to be something helpful, and I'm going to add that later. When we're talking about literature review as research method, you may be familiar with it. This is one of the most typical charts that I've seen about the different types of literature reviews, the different types of literature reviews. So I'm going to focus first on the, and I'm not going to go into detail into this, but if you look at, let's say, the left half of this chart, you're going to see traditional reviews, reviews of reviews, and then systematic reviews where you have all those. There are different types for different purposes, different objectives, but these are kind of the some of the most common ones. Then when you look at the top right side, you get to see that they are the qualitative versions of what you saw in the left side, right? And then in the middle on the right, you see the mixed method versions of some of them. And then at the bottom right, you're gonna see that there are also very specific purpose reviews. So again, it depends on the purpose, it depends on the expectation of the work that's been asked to be done. There are different types of reviews, and there are particular guidelines and steps that you have to observe to put them together. Whether you're putting them together or you're helping someone who's putting them together, one of the most critical thing is to identify exactly what is the objective that they want to accomplish or you want to accomplish. One of the big reasons for this is, and I believe me, I went through a lot of literature reviewing many of these because I'm expanding the slide set. There's a lot of confusion because some of these names have been used interchangeably. Some of the names have been used for different purposes. Historically, over the last 20 years, there have been some even terminology that have been changed from one objective to the other. I found that interesting. And on the other hand, there are some that are very specific and rarely used. So right away, sorry, I'm short of time here, but if you or your patron, your student, your faculty need to identify exactly what kind of review they should be using, there's actually a guide for that. I found it, and I know there are some others. There's great literature, by the way, which I'm gonna cite and show you. But I found this place, University of Melbourne Library, the LibGuide. They actually have a great guide on review types, and they have a typology of literature reviews, which is also, I found a great chapter, very detailed, very scholarly article on the different types, what to look for, how to put them together, etc. I'll share that with you later. Melbourne also have on that LibGuide, they have all this section here. What are the traditional review families? The systematic reviews, reviews of reviews, rapid reviews, which are very popular nowadays for us. So you want to find information on steps, guidelines, on putting them together. This is one place where you can go. The other thing that I like about University of Melbourne, and I know there are many others, but I'm using this as an example, they actually have this great tool to help you or your user decide what type of reviews to use. Scoping reviews, this is something that has been kind of something that has attracted me professionally for a while. The first time I saw a scoping review several years ago, I fell in love because I saw the utility of having a table showing different studies and looking at particular aspect of those studies. And by having it in a graphical way, it helped me actually identify either gaps in the research that I could fulfill with my own research, or look at different theoretical frameworks, see what has been studied or not, looking at results of the studies that I put together, and see whether the results will support my hypothesis or will refute my hypothesis, what kind of methodology has been used, the dates, the chronological aspect of the historical aspect of the topic, what has been studied when and what not. And then for the most part, the one thing I like is that not only I can use it to identify research gaps, but also if I add another column, and I typically do, I start adding quotes that I can use from that paper, or sections, or tables, or statistics, things that I can use in my own paper, I will add them there. So scoping reviews are a great tool. One thing that I'm gonna warn you about, when you look at literature or guides on how to put them together, just be aware that scoping reviews have been used interchangeably with other review methodologies. One of them is actually called mapping reviews. Another one is evidence maps. And again, the purpose of all those three, evidence maps, mapping reviews, and scoping reviews, they start from the same kind of purpose. It's basically looking at literature and putting them together in a way that you get to see what's there. But after many years and different attempts, some people have actually defined what a good scoping review is versus what is the purpose of a mapping review versus what is an evidence map. And one of the very latest publications, this one here, mapping reviews, scoping reviews, evidence, and gap maps, same but difference. You're gonna see in a very short article, well, not too short, but it's not too extensive, exactly a good definition of what they are, how to use them, etc. There are other articles I'm gonna include here. I found a great article showing the perceived strengths, the perceived weaknesses, and examples of many of these types of reviews, not only scoping, but some of the other families as well. For these three different types that are interchangeable, you can see on the top part of this chart, the things where all of them converge? What are they doing that they are more or less similar about? And then at the bottom, you get to see what is actually the purview of scoping reviews versus mapping reviews. Something that I mentioned from the chat earlier about, it may be way up there, but somebody was talking about the generalized use of reviews, systematic reviews, scoping reviews in non-medical literature. And that's something that, oh my God, it's something that I've been identifying and helping students get out of that, because you're gonna find a lot of articles that are called systematic reviews that are not that. Some people are calling systematic review something that is more like a scoping review or even a mapping review, but the title is actually a systematic reviews because they assume that's what a systematic way of reviewing the literature is. So if you go outside of the medical literature, when you look at reviewing the title or scoping review or systematic review, you will have to go another step and make sure to check what that article is about before recommending it to a student. Again, a lot of these names have been used interchangeably, and when it comes to medical literature, it's actually hurting a lot the evidence-based process. We teach evidence-based process as if systematic reviews is at the top of the pyramid, right? Or at almost at the top of the pyramid. And we're telling students, these are actually already put together. They are good to use. You don't have to do a lot of reviews on them. I'm finding that if you don't do a review on systematic reviews, you're gonna end up having articles, papers that are not of the quality that we need in medical research. Yeah, thank you. Yes, it's 1:00. I know some people have to leave. So yes, I'm gonna share this through ACRL and you get to see the slides later on. If you have to leave, it's okay. Thank you for being here. We're gonna keep going because then we're gonna have a discussion section in a minute. The last thing that I'm working with, I mentioned that I really don't like reinventing the wheel. And I come from a background where I've worked in very low budget libraries. So we actually have to put things together on our own that may actually help with our students and faculty. So I'm actually developing, I mentioned this before, I keep working on this. I'm looking at citation managers as scoping tools for our students. And recently, over the summer, I had little time because of my health condition, but I was able to put this together. And this is just a sample of what I'm working with. I'm going to develop and show it to you later, more developed. I'm using right now EndNote and Citavi and modifying the way that some of the fields that they have available. I'm not changing any of the key or I'm not changing any of the pre-formatted fields on EndNote or Citavi. Both of them have between 9 and 12 custom fields that you can actually rename any way you want. And that's exactly what I did. This is an example of using EndNote as a scoping tool. What I like this is because you can have the student put together their literature search, their citations on EndNote. And then by having this, by adding these fields, you can actually have something that you already work with, add these fields, and then they can use EndNote to still working on the review process. They don't have to redo this. They don't have to put this in another tool. They don't have to spend money on very expensive tools. If you're working in an institution that they don't have Covidence or they don't have any of these other great tools, but too expensive, there's a way that you can still provide them with great tools to put together a good scoping review. Look at the subject headings I created here. I basically created the subject headings for a good scoping review. Author and year, that's already there. What I did, I moved the title, author, publication. I moved those outside of view and put into display these customized fields. I call it scoping review, research question or variables or issues, populations or samples, methods, main findings, limitations, or notes. So for every study, the student get to, they can change this if they want, but they can go to every one of the citation and identify what are the points on every one of these points. Now, this is because I use a scoping review as a template, I'm using those headers, but you can actually use PICO as a header here, the patient, intervention, comparative, etc., right? Or you can use any of the other formats for medical questions and put that there. You can also include statistical analysis, or you can put other things depending on what the patron needs or the student needs. And then you're going to create something that more likely will look like, oh, this is how I change them. I forgot to mention this. This is how I change the customized field and created that table. And then I actually changed the order of the display. So everything that typically you're going to see on EndNote is not going to show, but this is what it's going to show on my table. And let me see what is the example. Oh, it's not showing. Oh my goodness. I actually put together a table and put data, and it shows like a good scoping review, and it's just on EndNote. What I like about that, I'm sorry it's not showing up, but what I like, why I like using Cytavi and Excel is that the student or myself can actually export this table into Excel, and then you can start playing with it real nice. You can sort by columns. So if you're looking, for example, if you have something that may work like, oh, I went blank now. You can sort methodologies. You can have them in alphabetical order if you like, or you can give, you can create a scale for some items. So you can actually start looking at points in favor, points against. You can create your own notes and sort on supportive literature for the research question, supportive literature for the methodology, supportive literature for my findings, opposing viewpoints. So you can create a customized table with the findings of your own literature. You can sort it out. And because you're working on Excel, this is a great thing as well. You can create, you can export a Word document with just the items of one of the columns. So let's say I want to look at the methodologies, and then it's going to show me all the methodologies, and then I get to identify gaps. Or I can actually create customized tables that I can use as a scoping review or pre-scoping review and put it on my paper. Same thing with Cytavi. One downside of Excel, it used to be great before the version 9 went off. Now you cannot save this as a template. Once you change the display, if you want to go and look at traditional bibliographic fields again, then you have to go back and change them. So it's going to look all the time as you set it up, and then you have to switch it back. On Cytavi, however, this is a great thing. On Cytavi, I can create customized templates. So I can have one for PICO questions, or I can have one for scoping review. I can have one for qualitative analysis. Again, I can create all these templates on Cytavi, and automatically, you don't have to go through the hoops like in Excel to create an Excel export. Automatically, there is a button that is going to create your Excel spreadsheet right there and then. So once I finish putting all this together, I think there's going to be another webinar, and most likely I'm going to also post this. I'm going to publish this so everybody gets to see how it is and put things together on a LibGuide, so you all have these resources to use. My apologies for chatting too much. I went over time. So now I want just to ask if you have any questions. If not, we're going to switch to the discussion section. George, do you want to announce anything? We're going to have the link for the slides later. We're going to provide that. And most likely, I think we're going to save the chat as well, so you can have those resources as well. Let me
Hi,
see.
yeah, I don't have anything else to announce, so if you're ready, I can turn off the recording and we can go into the discussion portion.
Sure. Let's do that. Thank you.